It started with Amanda. She called one evening later than usual, her voice tight with something I couldn't name. "You ever feel like you're outgrowing the version of yourself people need you to be?" she asked, not even saying hello. I sat up in bed. "All the time." "What's going on?" She paused. "I think I'm applying to transfer. I can't stay at the conservatory." "What?" "But you've been working toward that your whole life." "I know," she said quietly, "but it feels like I'm living someone else's version of my dream. And every day I keep pretending, the further I get from who I actually want to be." I didn't know what to say at first, because Amanda had always been the stable one. The girl with the 5-year plan, the cello prodigy with sheet music for a heartbeat. But I also knew what it felt like to finally tell the truth and how terrifying and freeing it could be. So I said, "If it's not your dream anymore, then it's okay to let it go. You deserve a life that feels real." She started to cry then, soft and messy. "Do you think I'm selfish?" she whispered. "No," I said. "I think you're brave." A week later, Amanda showed up on campus with a duffel bag and a box of frozen pumpkin muffins. "Just for the weekend," she said. "But maybe also to remember who I am when no one's grading me on perfection." It was surreal, having her in my space, my queer little dorm room with fairy lights and too many mugs. She sat on my bed, eyes roaming across the walls. "You look so settled," she said. "Like you built a life that fits you." "I'm trying," I said honestly. "It's still a work in progress." She smiled. "I think I'm still waiting for permission to start." That night, we took a walk around campus. The leaves crackled underfoot, and I could see our breath in the glow of the street lamps. Amanda wrapped her arms around herself, and I offered her my scarf. "Is this the same one you wore in high school?" she asked. "Yep. Except now it's not a disguise. It's just a scarf." She laughed, and then her face softened. "Sky," she said, "do you ever miss being invisible?" I thought about it. Sometimes. But only on the days when the world feels loud and cruel. On the quiet days, I like being seen. I like me. Amanda nodded. "I'm trying to get there." "You will." The next morning, we got coffee at the student-run cafe. While we waited, Amanda scanned the bulletin board covered in flyers. One caught her eye. Seeking voices for a new campus scene, identity, reinvention, resistance. Submissions open through November. She took a picture of it. Later, while she packed to leave, she turned to me. "Do you think they'd want something from someone like me?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're someone with a story. That's more than enough." She bit her lip. "I might write something." "I hope you do." Then, without warning, she hugged me, tighter than usual, the kind of hug you don't give unless it means something. "Thanks for giving me permission," she whispered. "You didn't need it," I said. "But I'm glad you took it anyway." That evening, as I walked back from my creative nonfiction class, I stopped by the bulletin board and read the zine flyer again. I took a picture too, because maybe it was time to stop just writing essays for class. Maybe it was time to publish something, really publish something. Not as Skylar the student, but as Skylar the writer. Skylar the girl who lived. Back in my dorm, I lit a candle, sandalwood and smoke, turned on my playlist of melancholy indie songs, and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Submission for zine. The girl in the mirror wasn't me." Until it was. And then I began to write the part of my story I had never dared share with strangers before. I don't know how long I sat in front of that blinking cursor. Maybe an hour. Maybe 3. The dorm was quiet. My roommate was out. The hum of the radiator was the only sound, and the city outside my window felt like it was holding its breath with me. I kept rereading that first line. The girl in the mirror wasn't me. Until it was. It didn't feel like just a story title. It felt like a confession. A manifesto. A scar I was finally willing to show the world. The words came slowly at first. I wrote about the first time I saw myself, not in a reflection, but in a feeling. How wearing Amanda's lipstick wasn't about looking pretty, it was about not disappearing. I wrote about the fear, the secrecy, The way shame slithered in like fog under a door. I wrote about the helmet, about the hallucinations, about the day I thought I was breaking and ended up becoming. The more I wrote, the more I realized I wasn't just telling my story, I was stitching myself together. One sentence at a time. By the time I hit save, it was almost 3 a.m. I crawled into bed without brushing my teeth, the weight of the story still resting on my chest like a second heartbeat. I didn't sleep much, but I wasn't tired. I felt clear, lighter than I'd felt in weeks. The next day, I submitted it. No second guessing. No rewrites. Just attached the document, wrote a quick message, "Thank you for the opportunity. This story saved me," and hit send. A few days later, I got an email. "Dear Skylar, thank you for your submission. We read your piece with awe and emotion. It's unlike anything we've ever received. We would be honored to feature it as the opening story of our first issue. We've also attached a few follow-up questions if you'd be open to a brief email interview. Readers will want to know more about the girl in the mirror. Warmly, Jules and Danny, editors, Vox Scene." I screamed. Like, actual out loud screamed. Then I texted Amanda. "Sky, IT got accepted. First story in the issue." Amanda, holy. "Sky, you're a star. Glowing star, glowing star, glowing star." Amanda, "Also this means I have to submit now." Dang it. Sky, "Yes. Yes it does." The magazine launch wasn't until November, but the editors asked if I'd come to their weekly Vox meetups in the meantime. I was nervous, but I agreed. They met in the art building on Thursday nights, string lights, beanbag chairs, hot cider, the scent of paint and ink in the air. A mix of creatives I didn't know and some I had seen around campus, but never talked to. When Jules introduced me, "This is Skylar. She's the girl in the mirror," the whole room clapped. I almost cried. That night, someone passed me a Sharpie and told me to write my name on the wall. The Vox wall of voices. It was covered in names, quotes, tiny doodles, and affirmations. I wrote, "Skylar Jameson. I used to be afraid to speak. Now I make noise." Later, walking home under the orange streetlights, I felt like I'd taken another step out of the old world and into a new one. Not just Skylar the student. Not just Skylar the girl who survived. But Skylar the storyteller. Skylar the spark. When I got back to my dorm, I found Amanda had emailed me a draft of her piece. The subject line read, "Don't laugh. Or do. But read this first." It was about her cello. About how she used to think it was the only voice she had. And how she was slowly realizing she had a human one, too. I replied, "You're not just playing the notes anymore. You're writing the song." And for the first time in a long time, I realized something. I wasn't alone. And maybe I never had been. I used to think normal was something I'd never get to have. Not because I was broken, though I'd believed that for a while, but because it seemed like a club I wasn't born into. Normal people didn't have secrets wrapped around their ribs like mine. They didn't worry about what name to answer to at Thanksgiving or whether someone would clock their voice in a coffee shop. But that week, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No violins. No grand speech. It was just a Wednesday morning. I was sitting in a booth at the campus cafe, scrolling through my emails and sipping a lukewarm latte when a classmate, Kylie, from my lit theory class, walked up and slid into the seat across from me like we'd been doing this for years. "Hey, Skylar," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I blinked. I'd never told her my name. We'd only spoken once, during a group project, and I was still pretty sure I'd introduced myself as Ty back then, short for Tyler, the boy I used to pretend to be. But she looked me straight in the eye and said it again. "I liked your story in the zine. The way you described the mirror thing gave me chills." And just like that, I realized something. She hadn't seen the boy. She'd seen me. "Thanks," I said, my voice suddenly shy. She smiled. "My cousin just came out last year. You remind me of her." We sat there for 20 minutes, talking about writing and class and the girl on TikTok who made everyone on campus cry with her slam poetry. I laughed, really laughed. And not once did I have to explain who I was. I walked back to my dorm with this weird lightness in my chest, like I wasn't carrying the world anymore. Just a story. And even that didn't feel so heavy. Later that day, Professor Roman pulled me aside after class. "I read your piece," she said softly. It was stunning. I didn't know what to say. Compliments always made me a little awkward, especially from people whose approval felt like gold. "Thank you," I mumbled. She tilted her head. "Have you ever thought about writing a memoir?" I laughed, and she smiled knowingly. "I'm serious. I think you have more to say than you realize." And then she added, "You might just help someone else find their mirror." That night, I called Mom. She was in her pajamas, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, her hair up in a messy bun like always. We talked about school, about Amanda's cello audition, about how expensive good almond milk was now for some reason. And then I told her about the story. And about Kylie. And Professor Roman. And about how for once, I felt like I wasn't pretending. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I hope you know how proud I am." I did. But hearing it out loud still made my throat tighten. "You're not just finding yourself, Sky," she said. "You're teaching the rest of us how to see you, too." That weekend, Amanda and I sat by the campus lake, legs dangling over the dock. The trees were orange and gold, and her curls were wild in the wind. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. I nodded. "All the time." She looked over. "And?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But for once, I'm not scared of it." She pulled something out of her bag, 2 tickets. "To what?" "The first Vox showcase," she grinned. "They want you to read your piece live. On stage." I froze. No way. Too late. I already said yes for you. "Amanda, you're not hiding behind pages anymore," she said. "You're stepping out of the mirror." I looked at the ticket in my hand. My name was printed at the bottom in bold font, featuring Skylar Jameson, author of The Girl in the Mirror Wasn't Me. Until it was. My fingers trembled a little. But then I smiled, because for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to be seen. There's a strange silence that falls over a theater right before a show begins. It's not quiet exactly. There's rustling and whispers and phones being silenced, but it's full of something thicker. Expectation. Energy. Fear. Wonder. I stood behind the curtain, fingers curled tightly around the pages in my hand, waiting for my cue. The lights beyond the stage were dimming. Amanda gave my shoulder a squeeze. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I whispered. Then I smiled. "But I'm going out there anyway." The Vox Showcase wasn't just a school event anymore. It had grown into a full-fledged spoken word and storytelling evening. The campus LGBTQ+ Center had partnered with local arts organizations, and the small black box theater was packed. Packed. Parents. Professors. Students I didn't know. Some in suits, others in hoodies, all waiting to hear voices they hadn't heard before. And mine was the final act. I stepped out into the spotlight to polite applause that felt, somehow, enormous. The brightness blinded me at first. I couldn't see anyone's face, which helped, because I could pretend, for a moment, that I was still in my dorm, just reading aloud to Amanda. My hands trembled as I unfolded the pages. The microphone crackled. And then, I spoke. "My name is Skylar Jameson." But that wasn't always true. Not because it was a lie, but because it was a name I hadn't dared to say out loud. The room was silent. And as I read the story, my story, the one about mirrors and secrets and the terrifying joy of finding myself, I could feel something shifting in the air. When I spoke about hiding in oversized hoodies, people nodded. When I talked about the first time I saw myself in eyeliner and cried, someone in the front wiped their eyes. When I said, I used to be afraid the world would never see me. Now I fear it might, and not like what it finds, A murmur rippled through the dark. But then I said, "Now I've stopped waiting for permission. This is me, and I won't disappear again." There was a pause. Then, applause. Not polite, not mandatory. Real. Raw. Loud. I blinked through tears and gave a small bow, unable to stop smiling. As I stepped off the stage, the spotlight no longer on me, I realized something profound. The fear was still there, but it didn't own me anymore. Backstage was chaos. Amanda threw her arms around me, laughing through tears. "You were brilliant." I let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding all night. "I didn't faint," I said. "Not even a little," she grinned. Professor Roman approached next. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped me in a fierce hug. Then she whispered, "You have no idea how many lives you just touched." Maybe I didn't, but I could feel it. That night, back in our dorm, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Amanda stirred across the room. "You still awake?" "Yeah." She yawned. "You okay?" I nodded in the dark. "Just thinking about what comes next." The next morning, everything felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because I had. There was a knock on our door mid-morning. I answered it still in my robe, makeup from the night before barely wiped off. It was Kylie from Lit Theory. She held up a coffee. "Figured you might need this. You broke half the campus last night." I blinked. "What?" She smirked. "Skylar, you're trending on campus Twitter." I groaned. "No." "Oh yes. Hashtag Mirror Girl. Kill me now." She laughed. "No chance. We're going viral together." As she left, Amanda gave me a long look. "So, have you thought about it?" "About what?" "Your book. The full story. Not just the monologue." I shrugged. "Maybe." She sat down beside me. "I think the world needs to read it." I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "Maybe it's time." The next day, I opened a blank document. Typed 5 words at the top. "The Girl in the Mirror." And underneath, by Skylar Jameson. Not Ty. Not anonymous. Me. I had no idea how hard it was to write a book until I tried writing one about myself. Every sentence felt like walking barefoot across glass. Not because it was painful, though sometimes it was, but because it required so much deliberate honesty. You don't realize how many times you lie to yourself until you try to get it all down. And I wasn't writing fiction. This was my truth. My chapters. My reflections. My regrets. My becoming. I feel like I'm trying to explain a ghost to people who think ghosts aren't real. I told Amanda one night as we sat cross-legged in the middle of our dorm room, surrounded by pages. She handed me a piece of licorice. "Then tell them about the ghost until they start believing." That's the cheesiest thing you've ever said. She popped a red vine in her mouth. And yet it's true. The story started with the mirror, of course. The one in my old bedroom. The one I used to glare at and whisper things to. Back when I was still pretending to be someone named Tyler. Back when I believed disappearing was easier than becoming. I wrote about small moments. The pink hoodie I wore on my first real outing as Skylar. The first time I went to Target and walked straight into the women's section, not looking over my shoulder, not panicking, just walking. The feeling of trying on lip gloss and thinking, "This one's too much," and then buying it anyway. The grocery store cashier who called me ma'am and meant it. And the barista who still called me sir and didn't. I wrote it all, because it was all true. It wasn't long before Amanda suggested we let someone else read it. I hesitated. What if they think it's too much? She tilted her head. What if they think it's not enough? We gave a copy to Professor Roman. She called me 2 days later and asked if she could share it with a contact at a small indie publisher. My first reaction was panic. "No, I don't know if it's ready." Roman's voice was calm but firm. "Skylar, your story is important. You don't have to make it perfect. Just make it honest." So I said yes. That yes changed everything. Suddenly I had deadlines, editorial notes, questions about structure, pacing, voice. I met with an editor named Leo over Zoom. He had silver glasses and a deep, thoughtful voice. "I don't want to edit your truth," he said, flipping through his notes. "But I want to make sure you're telling all of it." That part scared me, because there were things I hadn't written yet. Like the night I almost ran away. The day I deleted every photo of my old self. The letter I wrote to my father and never sent. But I wrote them now. And sent them in. Amanda saw me crying once while editing chapter 12. She just sat beside me and handed me a warm mug of tea. "This is brave work," she said softly. "It's okay if it breaks your heart a little." One night, the publisher sent over mock-up cover designs. There were 3 options. One was abstract, a swirl of color and light, like a storm caught mid-birth. One was stark, a girl standing in front of a cracked mirror, face obscured. And one was a girl not hiding, looking right at the viewer. Strong. Skylar. Me. "I like the last one," I said. Amanda smiled. "Of course you do." The title? "The Girl in the Mirror Wasn't Me." Until it was. We kept it. I insisted. Because it was mine. Near the end of the semester, they printed galley copies for reviewers and sensitivity readers. One of the first reviews came in through email. It was short. Just 4 sentences. "I've never read a story that made me cry and then made me believe I could be real too." I saw myself in Skylar. And for the first time, I didn't hate what I saw. "Thank you." I read it aloud to Amanda. We sat in silence afterward. Then she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Graduation was only weeks away. But I felt like something even bigger was coming. The book. The launch. A world I wasn't ready for but wanted so badly to meet. And still, I wasn't sure what my father would say. If he would ever read it. If he'd see me on the cover and turn the page or throw it away. But maybe it didn't matter. Because I wasn't writing for him anymore. I was writing for the girl in the mirror. And she was smiling back. The campus bookstore was quieter than usual. Finals week had ended and most students were gone. But I had one more reason to be there. There, on a small end cap labeled local authors, sat 5 copies of a book with a familiar title. The Girl in the Mirror Wasn't Me. Until it was. By Skylar Jameson. I stared at the cover for a long time. There I was, clear as daylight, shoulders back, eyes forward, a soft breeze lifting my hair in the photo we'd taken months ago. They'd blurred the background, so the whole thing looked like I had just stepped out of a dream. And in a way, I had. Amanda and I had planned a small celebration for that afternoon. Just us and a few close friends, nothing fancy. But when I walked into the cafe off campus, I wasn't expecting what I saw. There were streamers. And balloons. And a chalkboard sign that read, "Congratulations, Skylar. Our girl in the mirror made it." A round of applause broke out. Even Professor Roman was there, sipping tea in the corner, waving at me like I was some kind of celebrity. I froze. Then I laughed. Then I cried. Amanda came over, hugging me tight. "You're not allowed to be modest about this," she whispered. "This is huge. I didn't think anyone would show up." "Well," she said with a wink, "turns out people kinda like you." By the time the sun started setting, I found myself sitting with Logan near the back of the cafe, watching the glow filter through the windows. He'd been quiet all night, not withdrawn, just thoughtful. "I read your book," he said softly. My heart skipped. "Yeah?" He nodded. Twice. There were parts one needed to go back to. Lines that felt like you were reading my own thoughts. I blinked, not sure what to say. Then he pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Remember this?" I opened it. It was the original poem I'd left him months ago. The one I'd slipped under his windshield during a thunderstorm. The one that ended with, "I am not who you remember. But I'm still someone worth knowing." "You kept it." "Skylar," he said, voice low. I never stopped reading it. Outside, dusk settled into night. People began leaving. The staff stacked chairs. And Logan and I sat in silence, hearts saying what mouths couldn't yet find words for. When we stood up to go, he walked me to my bike. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked. "All the time," I said. "I mean, after graduation. After the book. Where you go from here?" I looked at the stars and then at him. I used to think becoming myself was the end of the story. But now? I think it was just the first chapter. He grinned. "Then maybe I'll stick around and see what happens in chapter 2. I smiled, heart steady. "I'd like that." Later that night, as I curled up in bed with my book in my lap, a message pinged on my phone. "Dad, I picked up your book today. I'm only a few pages in. But I'm proud of you, Skylar. Truly." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. And then I cried again. Because those 4 lines were more than I ever expected. And somehow, they were just enough. The first snow of the season had come early. It blanketed the campus in soft white, quieting the world in a way that felt ceremonial, like the universe was asking everyone to pause. I stood at the edge of the quad, bundled in Amanda's scarf, the one with little foxes stitched along the ends. She'd wrapped it around my neck that morning and said, "For luck." But it wasn't luck I needed right now, it was courage. Today was the live panel for the university's Diversity in Media series. And I wasn't just attending. I was headlining it. The auditorium buzzed with low voices and creaking chairs. It wasn't packed, but it wasn't empty either. My heart thundered. Across the room, I saw familiar faces, Amanda and Kevin sitting front row, a beaming Professor Roman beside them, her hands folded like she was watching her own child take flight. Even Mom had made the trip from out of town, waving excitedly when she spotted me. And, behind them, Logan. He didn't wave. He just watched me with that calm, grounding presence that always seemed to say, "I'm here." The moderator tapped the mic. "Please welcome author and student, Skylar Jameson." I stepped forward. The applause hit me like a wave. "I never thought I'd be up here," I began, voice trembling just enough to be honest. My story started quietly. It didn't begin with a declaration or some bold act of rebellion. It began in mirrors, in silence, in shadows. A pause, but eventually it turned into a voice, a choice, a name. I spoke for 20 minutes about identity, fear, joy, writing, and being seen. About the cost of hiding and the power of honesty. About how a person can be both terrified and ready at the same time. And when I was done, the silence that followed was thick. Then, applause again. Louder this time. Like they weren't just clapping for what I said, but for who I was. Backstage, I collapsed into Amanda's arms. "You were incredible," she whispered. I was shaking the whole time. No one could tell. "You were poised, brave, honest, like a real author. Like a real girl?" I teased. She grinned. "Sky, you've always been real." That night, I found a small box waiting on my dorm bed. No name, just a note inside. "Real girls deserve real stories. This is for chapter 3. Inside the box was a silver pen, engraved in elegant script. Skylar Jameson. The handwriting on the card looked familiar. I checked my phone. One new message from Logan. "I'll be outside your window in 5 minutes. Wear boots." We're walking through the snow. We strolled under the orange glow of lampposts, fresh snow crunching underfoot, our breath fogging in the air. Logan was quiet again. So I asked, "Did you mean what you wrote?" He didn't hesitate. "I meant all of it. You don't need me to become who you are, Sky. But I'd be honored to walk beside you while you do." And that time, it was me who reached for his hand. And he didn't let go. I wasn't ready for what showed up on my doorstep the next morning. Well, it wasn't a doorstep exactly. It was my dorm mailbox. But the weight of the moment made it feel heavier than any parcel should have been. Inside the thin manila envelope was a single document, printed on expensive cream-colored paper. It was a publishing contract. A real one. From a real imprint. A division of a well-known publishing house that specialized in emerging queer voices. I froze. It had started with the campus panel. A literary agent in the audience had passed my story to an editor. That editor had read the early chapters of Reflections, my autobiographical fiction project, and wanted the rest. They wanted me. I sank onto the dorm hallway bench, envelope in my lap, rereading the terms for the 5th time. It wasn't just that they liked the story. They believed it needed to be in bookstores. And more than that, they wanted my real name on the cover. Skylar Jameson. It felt surreal, terrifying, beautiful. I called Amanda. She picked up on the first ring. Is it a good scream or a bad one? She asked, already laughing. I hadn't even realized I was screaming. Later that evening, we met at our usual spot, the back table at May's Diner. The waitress, Ruby, grinned when she saw me. The usual ladies? That ladies still hit like a gift each time. Yes, Ruby, I said with a shy smile. But maybe with a chocolate milkshake this time. I'm celebrating. Amanda couldn't hold it in. Sky's getting published. Ruby blinked. What? No way. Amanda clapped. Ruby did a little dance behind the counter. The cook in the back shouted congrats, without even looking up. It wasn't just a diner anymore. It was the place where I realized my dream had arms. And those arms were wrapping around me in the form of milkshakes, high fives, and unconditional love.